Thank you for all the speakers from the child development. Very good. So, yeah, the first person out is Dan Winter. He has a big following on YouTube and Facebook. And he has many sites, different websites. So Daniel Winter is from America, but now he lives in France. And he has a lot of different amazing backgrounds. He's been, for many years, he started early with in the University of Detroit. He received a bachelor in electric engineering and psychophysiology in 1974. He pursued graduate studies in psychophysiology and the origin of languages. So this session here is origin of languages, so he's very well suited to be here. So we're very interested to see what they have to say. Among others, he also been working with MIT Space Labs. He has been joined the Gurdjieff School and also been part and learned from Buckminster Fuller and Bento, yeah, Isaac Bento. So welcome, Dan. 20 minutes, yeah.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Yes, today's conversation is about a particular part of origin of languages, and we're staying with the theme of oneness by talking about fusion in the origin of alphabets. Can you allow me to share screen there?
I think it should be possible already.
Please ask the host to give you permission. Record. Oh, no, record.
It says?
Oh, yes. No, I'm sorry. It is working. I'm sorry. Yes. So can you see my screen? So,
yes, it's
yes, good. Good. So communicating fusion.
If you can make full screen, maybe also.
Yes. Well, this is the setup here because of the record function.
Okay, that's good.
So it's about communicating fusion, the idea of oneness, which we're speaking about, in the origin of sacred alphabet, the Platonic implosion in the origin of alphabets. The website for this is goldenmean.info/DNA. And the first part of this is the origin of spin, is the origin of mass, time, and creation. So, for example, when a dervish turns, it's called time travel, but actually the physics of the dervish turn, in that spin, the master knows if he has pure intention, if he's making a kind of gravity, that means he does not get dizzy. And that's the subject of this conversation about origin of alphabets. As these toroid spinning donuts rotate, how they create the centripetal force, and that's key to the origin of sacred alphabet, how they implode, literally. We also discussed how tornadoes effectively are steered. If you look at a shaman steering a tornado, you notice at the center of a tornado, you have actually a pentagram. And that pent at the origin, the center of a tornado, is implosive, making it centripetal. And the shaman would say, I'm eating the pucha, the anger. It's actually embedding in the tornado the bioplasmic streamers and making it centripetal and literally making the gravity that steers that tornado. And that fabrication of gravity at the center of the spinning toroid vortex tornado is the subject, actually the key to the origin of sacred alphabets, and therefore the origin of fusion and communication. So what makes those recursive currents of turning inside out in the center of a tornado centripetal? This is from the famous movie Twister. And if you map the path to the center of that vortex, you see that when they provide a telemetry to find the geometry of the center of a tornado, you find this shape, which is turning inside out perfected. It's called the Anu. And if you look at that Anu, it's what the clairvoyant saw at the heart of the sun and the heart of the human and the heart of the hydrogen, which is a 7 spin outside, 5 spin inside. As an example, in the human heart muscle layers, the 7 spin symmetries of the tetrahedron, which we're going to see then directly becomes the origin of the alphabet. Here, it's the origin of the famed Enochian sigil of truth, 7 spins, 5 spins, which we'll see actually became an alphabet for the movie Star Wars.
So the French ask for a little bit slower, so it can be possible to translate also.
Yeah, you gave me 20 minutes. Originally, I needed 2 hours.
Yeah, you do what you like.
This is 7
best. Thank you.
spin outside, 5 spins inside. What that symmetry does, it creates 7 arrows, which we're going to later see is the key to the origin of sacred alphabet, both Hebrew and Sanskrit. And see, these are just images of the origin of that perfected slipknot, because that's what we're going to be talking about when we look at the origin of sacred alphabet, is actually how you tilt those donuts, how you make that array. So if you look at this, the Anu, the 7-spin, 5-spin in 3D, you see a perfect vortex, actually. And this is, we're going to see, is actually what we do when you make matter out of light, as in the physics of the atomic table. The platonic nesting of those torus vortex wormhole donuts is literally, and I mean literally, the atomic table. So if you learn accurately, here's the nucleus, nuclear geometry, the hadrons, the protons, and neutrons. And this is the electron shell geometry. And you see they're both simply a nest of platonic solids, this geometry here, this Starmiller kit. So if you learn to accurately tilt your vortex donuts, you literally make matter out of light. So you have your kind of cookie cutter creation. This is the platonic nest of vortex donuts, which the clairvoyants accurately saw when they wrote occult chemistry, psi perception of quarks, which is actually the physics that was later proven in subatomic chemistry physics. So that's all about implosion. That's really what that is about. So if you understand implosion, which is perfected compression of charge, you learn the origin of life. You learn the origin of self-organization, what's called neg entropy. And that compression compressed the charge inside your body into an array called longitudinal, sometimes called heaven or planes of Sharon. And that array is based on this compression called fractality, which golden ratio perfects, as you see here, golden ratio in the geometry phi in the geometry of Mandelbrot fractal. And if you rotate that golden spiral, you make this very famous origin of the Holy Grail. And that becomes, that fractal field revolution, origin of neg entropy, we have applied to medicine, Therify.net, and brainwaves, like mind.com. It's in a way, the medbed, for example, the idea of regenerative chamber, we have used that implosion fusion in Therify.net, creating that rejuvenation. So this is the, again, that same model of the vortex on the spiral. So now we get to the alphabet. So this is, you see a perfect Valentine fusion. Now see that golden spiral self-organized on that torus. Now if we take the 7 spins of that tetrahedron, which remember is tetracubic symmetry, we took those 7 arrows, remember on the outside, and we index how those 7 arrows fit on the 7-color donut map, which is also self-organizing. It's the oldest problem in topology. You see those 7 arrows, which is the origin of heart muscle, and the Anu is also the origin of Hebrew and Sanskrit. That's the point I'm about to make. So we're going to animate those 7 arrows on that spiral. And my book on this is called Alphabet of the Heart. And you'll see that my books are all at goldenmean.info. And on the right, you're going to see that this actually creates not just the shape of the Hebrew letters, but the sound of the Hebrew letters, called spectrograms of the Hebrew alphabet. So again, you're just visualizing that spiral on this torus. And then if I animate that spiral on this torus, first we'll just get a sense of this. Here is as simple as ABC. So the alphabet was the skill to nest the angle of vortex toroid plasma donuts literally in your mind, which if you understand how kids see without their eyes, they say, I'm seeing through a vortex inside my head, seeing through a tunnel, a tube. So the physics of perception, but literally the physics of consciousness, is precisely this and only this vortex of plasma inside your head, the holographic brain, actually as Carl Friedman called the holographic brain, it's a plasma toroid which exists in the upper cortex, and you're learning a skill to tilt that donut, and by doing that, you learn the alphabet, which is learning how to steer the vector directions, which, for example, would then be how you navigate in a lucid dream or when you die. So that's, again, the ABCs. So now this is the most important in this series. So here is Hebrew. So this, I've taken that same spiral, the same tetra, and I'm looking at that tetra from the different arrows, 7 arrows in that tetra, and I see Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, in this case, Hey, the origin of Hebrew. I'm simply indexing the angle of spin into that tetra cube. And that creates the possibility of implosion. We're going to see that's called phase conjugation. So phase conjugation looks like this. This is the first time self-organization, negentropy, and time reversal was measured in physics, called phase conjugate optics. You make lasers approach each other like this, and the plasma fusion at the center is measured negentropic. For example, that is the physics, the reason Agni-Hotra works, as we taught there, thanks to our patients with beautiful Agni-Hotra Center there in Poland. So not only do we know why your hair stands up at the precise second of sunrise, sunset, is because the plasma is phase conjugating in 4 perpendicular directions, the physics of the sacred 4 directions in nature. And we also know in Agni-Hotra that we could perfect that. They put one of these copper tetrahedrons, copper pyramids under the flame, but the living plasma in that flame, they also put a giant copper pyramid below. We actually know now how to spectrum analyze the capacitance of those to create this conjugation of phases, which would make that plasma field aware, self-aware, entropic, alive, and mindful, what you would call spiritual. So it's all about the 4 light cones nesting. And by the way, the physics of Agni-Hotra is in the intro to my new book, Origin of Biological Entropy, fractalfield.com. So, for example, we took that copper pyramid, copper or gold, because of the dielectric constant in Agni-Hotra, and we spectrum analyzed it here for this tree, and optimized for, in this case, the Schumann harmonics, which are golden ratio multiples of Planck. Here, the Schumann harmonics, you can barely see them, sorry, they're lower in the green. Those are the Schumann harmonics, 7.8. And above, you see the blue frequencies are actually calculated by equation, golden ratio powers of Planck, which is called origin of negentropy. You see, those are the Schumann harmonics, the brainwave harmonics, and the implosion harmonics in general to make negentropy, self-organization, which becomes our successful international curriculum for teaching the physics of peacemaking, peaceuniversity.net. So once you understand that the definition of peacemaking is precisely this negentropy, you applied it in brainwave frequencies, in heart frequencies, in geobiology frequencies, in plasma frequencies, in economics, and in touch. Actually, the physics of teaching peacemaking is this process of teaching how this self-organization occurs. For example, as Callahan measured, when war breaks out between 2 villages, you measure the broken magnetic lines between them. When you restore those magnetic lines, those 2 villages' emotions touch and creates that embedding, that fusion, which is peacemaking. Here's peacemaking in brainwaves, flameinmind.com. So when you have these golden ratio harmonics in the EEG, the brainwaves on the right, and you have the same golden ratio harmonics in heart rate variability, in the breath at the center. And here, just the other aspect of this beautiful physics of the origin of sacred alphabet, the physics of fusion, and therefore oneness in the origin of languages, I replicated here in my first book, Alphabet of the Heart, the frequency signature, the pronunciation of the Hebrew letters, Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, originally called Spectrograms of the Hebrew Alphabet by Fred Wolf and Carlos Solares, whom I did work with. And basically, for example, here I pronounce Yod, Y-O-D, and you see in the power spectra, in the audio frequency analysis, the shape of the letters Y-O-D. And the reason you see that here, Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, is because you're making the sonic plicative hologram emerge from your mouth in the precise sonic geometry, which is the optical shape of the letter, because that is the waveguide. So the learning of the alphabet is actually the process of learning the physics of fusion. That's the point of this presentation. And in the advanced, you can see fractality in each letter. But here we just show this. This is called E pluribus unum from many one. And you thought it was many letters, but there's only one shape. You're seeing only one shape, and you're changing your point of view. The name for that principle is called consumed perspective. And for example, if you look at the first word of Genesis here, Bereshith, which Count of Fabre-d'Olivet translated at first in principle, the origin of thingness. Bereshith actually is the outside view of the spiral on that torus, and you walk 1/7 of the way towards center, and then look at the center again, and you spell the word Bereshith, which is the sequence of turns of mind merely necessary to turn inside out on the surface of a torus donut. That turning inside out ness is named consciousness, which is literally the origin of turning inside out ness, which is not only just how matter is created, but how mind is created. And later we're going to talk about the fact how this fits the physics of Sanskrit as well. Just called rays traced. You see the R-A-Y. You see all of the romantic, that the capital letters are said to be just double versions of the, let's see if our animation will play here. And this is also called the glass bead game. Here's the ABCs and the glass bead game. You know, we've been working on this for 20 or 30 years, so sorry if these slides go too fast. But there's the glass bead game you see in the Buddha sense. Yes, these are glass beads, and this is a glass bead game. And if you tilt these symmetries correctly, you make the genetic code, basically, because the codons are tetracubic. And this is some of the original math we did to do these equations. Again, there's too much here. But let's just look at this for a moment here. So this is the physics of the relationship between Hebrew and Sanskrit here. In Hebrew, they took this same spiral on the torus, the 7 tetra arrow views, and they put these tagin or crownlets above the rabbi to tell you where you are in the tetracube. But now below, if you remove the tagin or crownlet and instead install a vertical horizontal bar to indicate your position in the tetracube, the same letters make Sanskrit. So you see that the physics of that alphabet, and that the symmetry of those plicatives is actually, whether that's guttural, cerebral, dental, or labial, the index of all possible phonon plicatives, which is famously the origin of Sanskrit, also relates to that phonon physics of the origin of Hebrew, the spectrogram of the Hebrew alphabet, sound making the letter, which is here, again, the same sound making letter, the aleph. You see the aleph and the yod there. Sound makes the shape of the letter if you simply spectrum analyze. And here, we acknowledge Valerie. Here she helped us. The OE sound, as in the fetus and the egg, the OE actually indicates the dimpling process of turning inside out, which is how an egg fertilizes. And this introduces the idea of consumed perspective, that the perfected charge collapse, that inversion point induced when the alphabet makes that phase conjugate implosion, is literally the origin of all possible perspective, invert mirror symmetry. And in the advanced physics, we teach how John Dee used a scrying mirror to communicate with ancestors, because this interferometry is the physics of ancestor radio. And this is advanced conversations about how the opposing pairs of perfectly symmetric opposing letters conjugate implode. And the obsidian mirror, for example, the Olmec used to think with ancestors. Ancestor memory is that array. And more examples, the Ophanim Enochian, later used to make the movie Stargate, and the names of angels is another example of that symmetry. It happens to be hypercubic. And again, that's more than time for here. And so if you take the perfected collapse that the symmetry of that array permits, we showed you the Star Miller kit, you get the concept of the origin of all negentropy, literally communicating fusion in the languages. This is from the origin of Greek, from the Ophanim Enochian. Here is the angel names in a symmetry table called the Tablet of Malvaj, that angels, intelligent plasma beings, are actually a sequence of symmetry operations. Here is the Ophanim Enochian root for origin of Cherokee. That would happen to be involved because of Dahani Wahu, whose name for the ancient Ophanim Enochian worldling ones was the Adawi. And this same symmetry index origin of alphabet is Rovash Irash in the dragon script DNA, the origin of the sacred alphabet of Hungarian. And here, then, if we play the little animation, you see the origin of Cyrillic. So this sacred Russian alphabet, you see what, if you play the animation, you see at a certain point at which two opposing spiral vortex cones sampled in consumed perspective create the shape of the letters of what became Russian and Cyrillic and the roots to Greek. And so that this is giving us an idea that communicating how vortex nest is the sacred physics of all real communication. There's a there's a double vortex, which is the key to imploding. And this became then the famous Hermes tablets, emerald tablets of Thoth, Hermes. And this also became Bon Po. The Bon Po were animating those pairs of vortex. And the Bon Po, remember the name of bonfire. The bonfire in your mind is literally the flaming mind we're talking about. And here we show that movie Stargate, which is, and use those same letters of Fane and Enochian to focus the plasma into that mirror surface, which was a Stargate precisely because the phase conjugation at that surface embeds in that longitudinal interferometry, which is how a wormhole is born. And here's my early 3 books on the subject: Alphabet of the Earth Heart, Alphabet of the Heart was the first book. These are all at goldenmean.info, and they're available on Amazon as well. Implosions Man Detractor. And my current book, which is Origin of Biologic Nick Entropy. So again, see, that equation for those frequencies that creates that Caduceus cascade of implosion is the real physics of fusion. That fusion is the origin of that Nick entropy. And there's more slides here about how that implosion then exists in the geometry of DNA from the original geometric extensions of consciousness and Ting and Coxeter actually is the origin. So this, on the right, you see, not only is this the map to the sequence of superposed rotations named going to the next dimension in DNA, it is precisely, which we measure then as the physics of how Bliss here, then with these coherence in your EKG, you can measure that recursive braiding process imploding the DNA. Your DNA becomes toroidal, literally, the Lord of the Ring. And that implosion that happens because of the phonons of the EKG measurably braiding your DNA creates this nest on the right here called the Heinrich-Clouvet form constants lattice cobweb tunnel spiral, which is literally what you see at the moment of death, called the map to successful dying. And
thank you,
obviously we don't have time. I'm going to finish this
just
with the Lord of the Rings series. So if I take that sequence in the DNA, if I can find my Lord of the Rings slides here. Oh, here they are. So here is Lord of the Ring. You know, the alphabet on the letters on the side of that ring donut is actually the symmetry of your DNA becoming measurably toroidal. There's the torus in the DNA, in the photomicrograph of DNA of the torus, having implode braided in the process of bliss, literally ascension. And so the letters on the side of Lord of the Ring actually are based on the ancient Finnish Ugaric, and it's this braiding algorithm to make implosive braiding, which is the physics of not just the Lord of the Ring and those ancient Finnish alphabets, for example, but it's actually the physics of alphabets in general, which is a language of fusion, really the origin of oneness. So again, it's all at goldenmean.info/DNA ring. And, you know, been working on this for 30 years, so sorry this has been a little fast, but I wanted to show you some of the fun pictures.
Thank you, Dan. Amazing you get in so much in so little time. I also want to say we have 3 speakers, and we will take the questions after, so we'll let the next speaker before. So thank you, Dan. Next is